But Lent is usually the one that we start in the new year. And Lent's a big one, yeah? Lent is a big one. Actually, Jonah is the first one, but Lent is a big one. And it's always really, really nice. Everyone's very, very motivated. Everyone's starting Lent and just finishing like a whole series of weddings and baptisms and just so much celebrations that it's like almost like we're glad to have our weekends back. Everyone's glad to sort of just slow down for a little bit, at least I am. Maybe when you guys get to my age, you'd like to slow down a bit more. But it's nice. It's nice. Everyone's motivated. They want to start getting back into their spiritual life, their spiritual routines, trying to achieve something more in Lent. And we always start really, really motivated. And then we realize that Lent is 55 days. It's not the shortest one. Jonah, yeah, we can do that. We can do 3 short, quick days, yeah. But Lent is 55 days, and it's the hard one, yeah. There's no fish. It's quite hard, and so it's really hard to stay motivated, yeah. It's really hard to stay motivated in Lent and throughout Lent. Okay. So I just want to keep guys to keep that in mind as we're talking about what we're talking about today, because although we may lose motivation, the importance of what we're talking about today doesn't stop. The importance of desire or giving our hearts for Lent or giving our hearts to God, it doesn't stop. So even though you lose motivation, you've got to persist. Sort of like a lot of the times, like when we're towards the end of like our uni degree, towards the end of our schooling, and we've lost motivation, we just want it to be over, it's just the last few assignments or the last semester or whatever it is, and it's just you've got to find some sort of motivation. And because it's important for your career, it's important for your life. So this is equally as important. It's important to realize the importance of fasting and of Lent and of what we're talking about today. So the topic or the theme is desire Him, and the topic is giving our hearts for Lent. Yeah, which is really, really interesting. Like the beautiful titles. And when I started to think about what to talk about, giving our hearts, okay, it sort of rang a sort of bell in my mind. Giving our hearts, we tend to say it somewhere else. We tend to say we are giving our hearts to something or somebody on usually a weekly basis. Does anyone know where? Can anyone tell me? Yeah, in the Mass? Where? Which part? Bonus points. Yeah, very good. Very good. Okay. So it's the anaphora. Okay. If you're wondering, anaphora means offering up. Okay. So it's the beginning of offering up, and that's the beginning of the Mass. Yeah. And so the first thing in the Church, in its wisdom, the first thing that we talk about or that we offer up is our hearts. Okay. The priest says, "Peace be with you all, and also with your spirit." And then he says, "Lift up your hearts," and we say, "They are with the Lord," or "We have them with the Lord." Yeah. So technically, we're not actually offering up. We're stating fact. Yeah. We have them with the Lord. They're already with the Lord. Okay. He's asking, or in some translations, I know in Arabic certainly, it's more of a, "Where are your hearts?" Don't lift up your hearts. Where are your hearts? And the answer is, we have them with the Lord. It's like a question and answer. So technically, they should already be with the Lord. Yeah? So keep that in mind. But what do we mean when we say that our hearts are with the Lord? Has anyone really thought about that? Like, we say, yes, our hearts are with the Lord. What does it mean? Like, I actually want some responses. What do you think about when we say this in the Mass? When it says, "Lift up your hearts," and we, with one big loud voice, will say, "They are with the Lord." Bit of a funny saying, isn't it? I need one answer at least. Yeah? Okay. Good. Trust. Really good. Anything else? Yeah? Good. Good. You guys think that it's also like our attention now is with God? Yeah? So one is saying like turn your attention to here. Turn your attention. Where are your hearts? Where are your thoughts? Where's your mind? You've got to focus now. Yeah? And then we say yes. They are with the Lord. Okay? But sometimes I think it's more of a, yeah, they're with the Lord for now, but hurry up because it's not going to last very long. And we're going to go back to thinking about what we were thinking about 2 seconds ago. Yeah? Because we don't sort of pay attention that much, or we can't last that long with paying attention sometimes. But we need to remember that when we say our hearts are with the Lord, that it's not just at that point. It's not just at the moment of the Mass that our hearts are with the Lord. Because like we said just earlier, we're responding to where are your hearts, and we have them with the Lord. Okay, it's past that. We have them with the Lord. So technically, they should already be with the Lord before we respond, during our response, and after we respond. Yeah, it should be sort of a statement of a fact rather than a response. Yeah, and so that's what we want to try and talk about today. Is how to have our hearts with the Lord. Okay, for Lent or in general, as a statement of my life, as a fact of my life, that my heart is with the Lord. I once attended a youth day at the monastery, and Abuna Theodore, if you guys know Abuna Theodore there, he's not very, you don't see him very often, okay? And he was taking a group of a workshop, and it was really interesting, and I was sort of in that group, and I was like, oh, we're going to actually hear Abuna Theodore speak for like the first time. And he said something, and it was during Lent, it was the beginning of Lent, and it was about fasting. And he said something, he said, you can't talk about fasting without mentioning Isaiah 58. And I never heard that before. And I was like, what is Isaiah 58? And what's that about? And what's there to do with fasting? I've never heard it before. What is he talking about? So this is the passage that he was talking about, and it really struck a chord with me. And honestly, whenever I think about fasting, this is what I always envision here. Okay, so it's Isaiah 58. The verses are actually from 5 all the way to 9, and we're going to go through some of it today, or all of that today. But for now, we're just going to talk about verse 6 and 7. And he says, "Is this not the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out? When you see the naked, that you cover him, and not hide yourself from your own flesh." So a lot of time when we talk about fasting, we focus on the food. Okay, that's how we define fasting. That's how we define Lent. That's how we define Jonah. Jonah and Lent, we can't have fish in it, which is amazing because Jonah probably had fish as well. But we would define it by food. Yeah, what we can eat, what we can't eat, and how long we can't eat for, and we're vegan, and that's how we explain it to people that are not Coptic. And we define fasting by food, by what we eat. But if we're talking about this passage from Isaiah, and this is Christ, or this is God talking to Isaiah, he's saying, is this not the fast that I have chosen? This is the fast that God chooses. And nowhere in that passage does it talk about what I'm eating. Yeah? It does talk about food, but it talks about sharing your bread with the hungry. It doesn't talk about what I'm eating at all. Yeah? It's talking about to undo heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, break every yoke, not to share your bread with the hungry, that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out. When you see the naked, that you cover him, and that you hide yourself from your own flesh. It's very interesting, yeah? Something that we don't always hear. But the context of this passage is actually God talking to Isaiah about the Israelites, okay? The Israelites had gone astray, as they did many times. And God was telling Isaiah to go tell them that these people, these Israelites, are all show and no action, are all talk and nothing that they produce. They have done all of this stuff in my name, but they really haven't acted in my name. Okay? And he says it in the previous verse. This is what he's talking to Isaiah about. Is it a fast that I have chosen? Okay, so previously he's talking about this is the fast that I have chosen, and this is now God questioning Isaiah. He's like, is this the fast that I chose? A day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head like a bulrush and to spread out sackcloth and ashes? Would you call this a fast and an acceptable day to the Lord? If we looked at that without the context of what we were talking about in God and Isaiah and the Israelites, we'd look at that and say, yeah, that's pretty much fasting, yeah? Afflict my soul, I'm not eating. Yeah, I'm afflicting my soul. A lot of people have a very strong connection to food, so it's very afflicting to their souls. A day, is it to bow down his head like a bulrush, which is sort of like, I'm sad, I'm depleted, I look sick. This is stuff that we sometimes see. Is to spread out sackcloth and ashes. When they talk about sackcloth and ashes back in the day, it's like woe to me. It's the woe to me kind of people. All right? And we always talk about like, oh, fasting. Oh, we're fasting again. And this time it's straight vegan. It's no fish. And we complain. Yeah? So that's literally what he's talking about. Spread out sackcloth and ashes. Show people that you're fasting. And then he says, would you call this a fast and an acceptable day to the Lord? And it's a rhetorical question, because it's not what he intended fasting to be. And then he talks about what he wanted the fasting to be, which is the previous passage. So fasting, when it was talked about in the Old Testament, and even in the early church, was not always focused on food. And we tend to only focus on food. There's a big discrepancy there. Food is important, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying go ahead and go have Maccas and everything like that. I think I'd get in a lot of trouble if I said that. But I want us to focus less on food and more on what we're talking about today, giving our hearts to the Lord. But how do we do that? How do we give our hearts to the Lord? When we talked about that previous passage from Isaiah, undo heavy burdens, let oppressed go free. Like a lot of that stuff is very Old Testament style. We don't have poor around, or not that much. Like we have some poor around us, and Coco's does a beautiful service and all of that stuff. But we don't have that every day. Okay, we don't have people that don't have clothes around us for us to give them that clothes. Like we do. Don't get me wrong. There are some of those, but there's not as many as there used to be back in the day. And so we need to understand the spirit of what was being spoken here. What was God trying to get at when he was talking to Isaiah about the Israelites? What did he want them to achieve? And we will need to understand and know what state of the heart that does what God is talking to Isaiah about. What's that state? What's the state of that heart? Because that's where we want it. If you want your heart to be with God, okay, during the fast, we need to understand what state the heart that God is talking about here in this true fasting is. Yeah? Then I want to have a guess of what state of a heart that is. Might be a bit of a hard one. But it's an easy answer. And you'll realize when it's up there. Love. Okay? It's a really easy answer. The heart, the state of the heart is love. Okay? It's an easy answer. It's a simple answer. But it's a simple answer, but it's not an easy answer. Okay? It's a simple answer, but it's not an easy answer. What he's talking about to the Israelites is you've got to love the poor. You've got to love the oppressed. You've got to love the hungry. You've got to love the poor. And out of that love, you then serve them. You then give to them. You then do everything that was talked about in that last passage. And so if we want to sort of do what God was saying to, that is a true fast, if we want to attain that true fast, love is the state that our heart needs to be in during our fasting. There's a really nice story about St. Macarius, okay? And he explores this concept of love. It's a beautiful example of how a heart or hearts full of love act, all right? In a semi-modern day way, all right? So it's not Old Testament, but it's not our day and age, but you'll understand what I mean. I'll read the story together. It says, when a vine dresser saw that his vine had produced a cluster earlier than its regular season, he offered it to the great Saint Macarius as a present. The saint received it with great joy and sent it to a sick monk in the monastery, saying, perhaps this monk needs it most. The sick monk was very happy to feel the saint's concern, but before eating the grapes, he said to the messenger, there's another monk who needs this branch more than me. Every time the branch was brought to one monk, he would think of the others and send it off another way. Finally, the branch came back to Saint Macarius. The saint raised his eyes toward God and thanked him for the love, asceticism, and sacrifice of the monks. What really pleased the saint's heart was that all the monks had one attitude towards each other. Saint Macarius praised the Lord, who turned the monks into an orchid carrying the fruits of true love. So that's really true love, okay? When St. Macarius first thought of the sick monk, okay, there's a sick monk, he needs this more than I do, and he gave that cluster of grapes to the sick monk. That monk is actually sick. He has problems of his own. He has issues of his own. But he put that aside and thought of somebody else before him. That is truly a heart that is full of love and is in a state of love. And I tried to see how we would phrase this in a modern day way, okay? Because there's so many examples of how we can do this, okay, in our modern age and in our modern day. There's so many examples. I tried to sort of summarize it in one sort of way. So forgive me if this is very simple, but let's talk about a statement that says, it's not about me. That monk did the same, yeah? He said, it's not about me. It's not about me, even though he needed it. It's not about me. It's about somebody else. If my parents are annoying me, it's not about me. It's about them and how they feel. If my boss is annoying me, it's not about me. It's about showing love to him. If Abuna asks me to do something out of my comfort zone, it's not about me. It's about the people that I'm trying to serve, or Abuna is trying to get me to serve. If I'm tired and I just want to sleep without praying, it's not about me. It's about my spiritual life and my spiritual growth with God. If someone that I think is boring is sitting alone, it's not about me. It's about this poor person that needs to feel the love of somebody else. If I'm hanging for a steak and my iron levels are depleting, it's still not about me. Okay, it's about the fast that I'm in and the commitment that I made at the beginning of the fast. It's not about me. That's a concept that I think in our modern age we've really lost, because society will teach you that it is about you. It's all about you. It's how far you can get in your career. It's what your salary looks like. It's what your friends look like and how your social group is. It's about how much you've traveled. It's about you. It's all about you. It's all about what you've done, what you've accomplished. How have you achieved this? It's never about the other person. But the good thing about this is that in every scenario, in every conflict, in everything that you find yourself struggling in, there's always another person to think about that's not me. In all those examples, there was always somebody else to think about. There's always somebody else. There's always a parent or a sibling or a boss or colleagues or somebody else to think about other than me. And it takes a lot of training, and it takes a lot of dedication and a conscious effort to actually stop and think about somebody else rather than myself. You actually notice this whenever you're having a conversation with somebody and you tell them of an experience, like, I had really bad traffic this morning. And then a lot of the time their response is, oh yeah, I had really bad traffic last week and it was really, really bad. And again, it's about me, okay? But there's another person in that conversation that wants to be heard and wants to be, and wants to debrief. So it's always somebody else in that same scenario that needs needs you to think about them. And God is in every one of those people. God is in every one of those encounters that you make. God is in your parents, your siblings, and your colleagues, in every one of those. And we know this because we read in Matthew, and everyone knows this story, okay? And the king will say to those who are in his right hand, "Come here that are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." We know that in other people, God resides. We know that when we do something for somebody else, that's doing something for God. And so if we want our heart to be with God, and we want to give our heart to God, we need to give our heart to others. We need to give our heart to our siblings, our parents, our colleagues, everyone, even if they're so irritating and annoying and a hard person to deal with. No tapping backs. But if we look at that, doesn't that sound familiar? Like, didn't we just read something from Isaiah that looked exactly like that? Yeah? That was talking about the naked and clothing the naked and doing all that stuff. So it's actually amazing because it's one of the rare times that you see that the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament are one. They're the same person. They're not different. He was talking to Isaiah about the exact same thing so many years before he came to earth and said it. And fasting hasn't changed. The love for others hasn't changed. And what he's asking of us hasn't changed at all. But it is a hard task. Like we said, it's simple. It's not hard, it's not complicated. But it's not easy. It's difficult. What we're really talking about here requires a lot of humility. Yeah? It requires a lot of not thinking about myself as much. C.S. Lewis describes humility as not thinking less of myself, but thinking of myself less. Does that make sense? Not thinking that I'm so bad and I'm the worst person and remembering all my faults and all my sins and all my... That's not humility. Humility is actually thinking less of myself. Sorry. Thinking of myself less. So, considering others before myself. Considering the person in front of me before I consider myself. Like that monk was doing. That monk thought of everyone else before his sick self. How many of us can say that we do the same? One of my favorite quotes about humility comes from Metropolitan Anthony Bloom. If you haven't read this book, it's called Beginning to Pray. We're still in the beginning of Lent, so it's a great book to read. It's not going to take you very long, but it'll transform your prayer life. It's beautiful. But this is one of my favorite quotes about humility. It says, the word humility comes from the Latin word humus, which means fertile ground. To me, humility is not what we often make of it. The sheepish way of trying to imagine that we are the worst of all and trying to convince others that our artificial ways of behaving show that we are aware of that. Humility is the situation of the earth. The earth is always there, always taken for granted, never remembered, always trodden on by everyone. Somewhere we cast and pour out all the refuse, all we don't need. It's there, silent, and accepting everything, and in a miraculous way, making out of all the refuse new richness in spite of corruption, transforming corruption itself into a power of life and a new possibility of creativeness, open to sunshine, open to the rain, ready to receive any seed we sow, and capable of bringing 30-fold, 60-fold, and 100-fold out of every seed. Humility, contrary to popular belief, is not passive, it's active. When he describes humility as fertile ground, and that fertile ground takes everything and then produces something from it, the fertile ground isn't staying stagnant, it's not doing nothing, it's producing something. Humility is taking everything from everyone, not considering myself, and allowing the fruits of that person to then grow. Does that make sense? And that's, I think, how we have our hearts with God, is through love to others, through not thinking of myself, thinking of others. If we truly want to desire him, like the theme says, we've got to desire others. We have to love others. We have to give our hearts to him by giving our hearts to others. The rest of the passage of Isaiah says that once you truly achieve this true fast, listen what happens. Then your light shall break forth like the morning, your healing shall spring forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, here I am. That is the picture of a very close relationship with God. That is the picture of somebody that has spent a lot of time with God. When the Bible says that David's heart was after the heart of God, okay, because he showed love to everyone. King David, if you think about it, did some incredible things. When a king was trying to kill him, still showed love to that king because he was the anointed of God. He showed love in every situation, and that's why he was called he was said to have a heart after the heart of God. Okay, that's the definition of what we're talking about today. Is I want to give my heart to God. The last thing I want to talk about today is the gospel from last week. All right, from last Sunday, if anyone remembers it. The church in its wisdom, right before Lent, you will always read this gospel, and it's talking about how not to show that you're fasting. Sort of similar to what we were talking about before with Isaiah, not to go unshaven, not to go like not clean and to show everyone that I'm fasting, but to wash your face and to make sure that you're smiling and you're happy, because when your Father sees what is in secret, he will then reward you openly. And then, so that's the preparing for fasting. So he's telling you that this is what you should do when you're fasting. But then he goes into and talks to them and teaches them how to pray. Yeah? So he went straight from that into teaching them our Father who art in heaven. Yeah? So that's why it's so closely related. That's why we always talk about, or in the fraction, it's always fasting and prayer, fasting and prayer, fasting. They go hand in hand. Yeah? Literally, like a few verses between them. But even in the Our Father, okay, there's something really important to notice. And when I noticed this once, it really stuck with me. In the Our Father, everything that we say is an action of God, except for one thing. We only have one thing to do. All right, we're going to say it together, and you'll realize what it is. So it's Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, still God doing, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And the rest is also still God. Okay. The one thing that we are asked to do in the entire of the Our Father is forgiveness. And so forgiveness is a keystone of fasting and of prayer. You can't love somebody, you can't have your heart with God without having forgiveness in there as well. You can't love God and then hold a grudge against somebody. You can't love God and be in conflict with somebody for a very long time. You can't love God and hate your brother. It's contradictory. Doesn't work. Doesn't form together. Forgiveness is so important when it comes to fasting. Because if we want to give our heart to God, we can't give it if he hasn't forgiven everyone. Because God has forgiven everyone. And even in the gospel last week when he speaks about that and then he says our Father, right after it he gets into forgiveness and why it's important to forgive and so on. Because that's the only thing that God requires of us in that prayer. He only requires of us to forgive. And leave the rest to me. Forgive, give your heart to me, love others, and the rest leave to me. Today was short and sweet, so I hope, or maybe not too short, I hope you learned something. But I think that if we look at our situations, or if we look at our lives, we look at the people around us, our family, our friends, our colleagues, our work, our uni, everyone, every relationship that we have, we will always find space to show more love. And fasting is the best time to try and practice that, okay? It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be immediate. You can't, you're not going to leave out today, and then tomorrow you're going to think about it, and you're going to do it immediately. But it'll be on your mind, okay? It'll be one of the things that you think about when you come to react to what somebody has said, or react to your parents, or react to siblings. It's that I need to show them love. Even if they don't show me love, okay? That's the other thing. Even if I don't receive love, I must always show love. Glory be to God forever and ever. Short talks mean no questions, so... No, I don't.